The history of the Silk Road, a journey through the world's oldest superhighway. What if I told you that more than 2,000 years ago, there was already a global network that connected the East and the West, not digitally, but physically? A massive web of trade routes that stretched across deserts, mountains, and empires. It wasn't built by tech giants, but by merchants, nomads, and emperors. This is the story of the Silk Road, a highway of culture, commerce, conflict, and connection. Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most legendary trade networks in human history. Grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's explore the winding path of the Silk Road, where silk was just the beginning. So, first things first, what was the Silk Road? The Silk Road wasn't a single road or route. It was a sprawling network of overland and maritime paths connecting China with the Mediterranean, running through Central Asia, Persia, India, and the Middle East. And while silk is in the name, traders moved way more than fabric. Think spices, glass, paper, precious stones, philosophies, religions, and yes, even diseases. The Silk Road got its name from the most famous commodity traded on it, Chinese silk. This material was so luxurious, so coveted, that it practically became a form of currency in the Roman Empire. Roman nobles would literally pay their weight in gold for Chinese silk garments. The Romans were so obsessed with silk that their own historians complained about the drain on Roman gold flowing eastward. But here's the kicker. The Silk Road wasn't called that during its heyday. The term Silk Road was coined only in the 19th century by a German geographer, Ferdinand von Richthofen. Kind of ironic, right? Now let's rewind all the way to the 2nd century BCE. The Han Dynasty was in power in China, and Emperor Wu had big dreams of expanding Chinese influence westward. He sent out a diplomat named Zhang Qian, whose mission was to find allies against nomadic tribes threatening the empire. Zhang Qian's journey was supposed to be diplomatic, but it turned into something much bigger. He spent over a decade traveling through Central Asia, was captured and held prisoner for years, escaped, and finally returned to China with tales that would change history. Instead of just finding military allies, Zhang ended up laying the groundwork for international trade. He brought back stories of powerful kingdoms to the west, the Greco-Bactrian kingdom, the Parthian Empire, and goods that were totally foreign to China, like grapes, walnuts, and horses bred for warfare. These weren't just any horses either. They were the legendary blood-sweating horses of Fergana, which the Chinese believed could run so fast they sweated blood. Spoiler alert, it was probably just a skin condition, but the mystique was real. From there, the trade exploded. Chinese silk made its way west, while the Chinese imported glassware, carpets, gold, and a whole bunch of cultural ideas. It wasn't just about stuff, it was about stories, technologies, and beliefs traveling across continents. Buddhism, for instance, spread from India to China and beyond, thanks to monks and travelers using the Silk Road. These weren't casual tourists. Many Buddhist monks walked thousands of miles, carrying sacred texts and translating them as they went. Figures like Xuanzang, the famous Chinese monk, spent 17 years traveling to India and back, bringing Buddhist scriptures that would shape Chinese spirituality for centuries. One of the most fascinating things about the Silk Road is how it linked some of the greatest empires in history. You had the Han Dynasty in China, the Persian Empire, the Greco-Roman world, and later the Byzantine and Islamic caliphates. These weren't just neighbors. They were trading partners, competitors, sometimes even frenemies. The Romans, for example, were fascinated by Chinese silk, but had no idea how it was made. They thought silk grew on trees. Meanwhile, the Chinese knew about Roman glassmaking techniques, but couldn't replicate them for centuries. And don't forget about the middlemen. Central Asia became a crucial hub. Cities like Samarkand and Bukhara became rich cultural melting pots, where Persian, Turkic, Chinese, and Indian cultures collided. These weren't just dusty pit stops. They were buzzing cosmopolitan centers, filled with merchants, musicians, scholars, and spies. Samarkand, under the rule of leaders like Timur in the 14th century, became one of the most magnificent cities in the world, with stunning architecture that still takes your breath away today. The Sogdians, an Iranian people from Central Asia, were particularly crucial to the Silk Road's success. They were the ultimate middlemen, master traders who spoke multiple languages, understood different currencies, and had networks spanning from China to Constantinople. They were so good at their job that they essentially became the bankers of the ancient world, developing early forms of credit and banking that made long-distance trade possible. But the road wasn't easy. The terrain was brutal. Blistering deserts like the Taklamakan, where entire caravans could disappear in sandstorms, treacherous mountain passes through the Pamirs and the Hindu Kush where altitude sickness claimed lives, and bandits around every corner. The Taklamakan Desert alone claimed so many lives that local legends spoke of spirits calling out to travelers, leading them astray. Traders often traveled in large caravans for protection, sometimes numbering in the hundreds, and even then, many never made it. Think Indiana Jones, but with camels and way more paperwork. The logistics were mind-boggling. A single trade expedition could take years to complete. Merchants had to plan for seasonal weather patterns, political upheavals, and currency exchanges across multiple empires. They developed sophisticated systems of credit, insurance, and partnership agreements that wouldn't look out of place in a modern business school. Now here's where things get even more interesting. The Silk Road didn't just shape the ancient world, it shaped the modern one too. For example, when the Mongols took over much of Asia in the 13th century, under Genghis Khan and his successors, they brought peace and stability, believe it or not, to much of the route. This period, known as the Pax Mongolica, allowed safe passage for traders, including one very famous Venetian, Marco Polo. The Mongols were surprisingly business-friendly. They established the first international postal system, created standardized weights and measures, and even issued the world's first paper money that was accepted across their entire empire. They also practiced religious tolerance, allowing Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, and other merchants to trade freely. Marco Polo's journey to China, which lasted over 2 decades, is one of the most legendary travel tales of all time. Whether or not he exaggerated his adventures is still debated. Some scholars even question if he actually made it to China. But there's no doubt his stories lit a fire in Europe's imagination about the wealth and wonders of the East. His descriptions of Kublai Khan's court, with its paper money, coal heating, and postal system, seemed like science fiction to medieval Europeans. That curiosity eventually helped inspire the age of exploration. Yep, you can draw a direct line from the Silk Road to the voyages of Columbus. But not all the legacies of the Silk Road were glorious. One of the darkest chapters was the spread of the Black Death. It's believed that the bubonic plague traveled westward along the trade routes, carried by rats and fleas on merchant ships and caravans. The disease likely originated in Central Asia, spread through China, then followed the same paths that had carried silk and spices. By the time it reached Europe in the 14th century, it wiped out roughly a third of the population, somewhere between 75 to 200 million people. The Silk Road also saw its share of conflicts and power struggles. The An-Lushan Rebellion in 8th century China disrupted trade for years. The rise and fall of various Central Asian kingdoms meant merchants never knew if their regular trading partners would still be in power when they arrived. The Crusades created additional complications for Christian and Muslim traders trying to work together. So what happened to the Silk Road? Well, by the 15th century, the overland Silk Road began to decline. The rise of powerful maritime empires, like Portugal and Spain, shifted global trade to the seas. New sea routes around Africa to Asia, pioneered by explorers like Vasco da Gama, made land routes less attractive. Why deal with bandits, mountain passes, and multiple political jurisdictions when you could sail directly from Lisbon to India? Add in political instability, the fall of Constantinople in 1453, and the gradual decline of key cities along the route, and the Silk Road gradually faded into history. The final nail in the coffin came with the development of faster, more efficient sea transport. Ships could carry far more cargo than camel caravans, and while sea voyages had their own dangers, they were generally faster and more profitable than the traditional overland routes. But here's the twist. The Silk Road never really disappeared. It just transformed. Today, we talk about the new Silk Road, or the Belt and Road Initiative, China's massive infrastructure project to reconnect Asia, Europe, and Africa with modern roads, railways, and ports. The name may be recycled, but the ambition is eerily similar, linking east and west in a grand web of commerce and influence. This modern version includes high-speed rail lines, deep-water ports, and digital infrastructure that would have blown the minds of ancient Silk Road traders. The parallels are striking. Just as ancient Chinese emperors wanted to project power westward, modern China is using infrastructure investment to build influence across Eurasia and Africa. The challenges are different. Instead of bandits, there are concerns about debt dependency and geopolitical influence. But the fundamental goal remains the same: connecting markets and cultures across vast distances. So, what's the real legacy of the Silk Road? It wasn't just about trade, it was about connection. It proved that the world has always been more intertwined than we think. The Silk Road was the internet of the ancient world. It moved ideas, technologies, religions, and entire worldviews across thousands of miles. It gave us innovations like paper, gunpowder, and the compass, spreading from China to Europe. It brought Islamic mathematics and astronomy to the West. It carried Buddhist philosophy eastward and Greek scientific knowledge in all directions. The Silk Road also taught us about resilience and adaptation. Despite wars, plagues, political upheavals, and natural disasters, trade found a way. When one route became dangerous, merchants found another. When one empire fell, traders adapted to new rulers. The human drive to connect, to trade, to share ideas proved stronger than any obstacle. And honestly, that's a legacy worth remembering. In our modern world of global supply chains and instant communication, we're still following paths first blazed by those ancient merchants and diplomats who dared to venture into the unknown, carrying silk and dreams across the world's greatest distances. If you enjoyed this journey through history, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that connect the past to our world today. Got a favorite Silk Road city or legend? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.